Sweet, I'm so tired of you. Every dog must have his day. Sweet, I'm so tired of you. Sweet, I'm so tired of you treat me this way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reach Out podcast. This is your host, Juan Pablo Orquez. And as always, I want to thank you for taking the time to work in your professional development journey. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Reach Out Podcast, on TikTok at The Reach Out Podcast. And if you're listening in, then we're available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So today we're interviewing a very special guest. Through his career, he has managed to become one of those people that have a lot to teach to the young graduates and college students. Stuart Chavez, welcome to the Reach Out Podcast, and how's it going?
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here. And Stuart, for the past couple weeks, we've been blessed enough to interview members from Microsoft that participated in the OLA student development event. And you were one of the volunteers that helped out that day, and I want to ask you, what motivated you to volunteer that day?
Good question. So the group within Microsoft that helped with that, right? I don't think they organized the entire thing, but they contributed. Is called it's OLA, and it's so in Microsoft we have lots of what we call ERG, employee resource groups, that are centered around lots of different things: families, military, different ethnicities. So that one focuses on Hispanics, and this year, so we do fiscal year, so it starts in July, and I was like, you know what? I've seen other guys at Microsoft have really good success engaging in different of our ERGs, so I thought I need to do that, and that seems like a really good group. And I tell you, the two folks that run that, Gustavo and Angela, I believe are their names, and they do a really good job. And I just because I'm old, Juan Pablo, and I'm inspired by them. They're a younger group, and they're just really motivated, and they do a good job. So I was like, anything I can do to help out, I want to do. So that was a cool event. I enjoyed it. Everybody I got to talk to was really good, and they're very engaging. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, well, as students, for us, I think I told you, but for you guys to take time out of your day to do this, it really means the world to us. And you're right, Gustavo and Andrea, they did really, really good job. And if you're watching these guys, then props to you. It really, really made a difference. So, that day we were all doing a really proactive exercise, which was mock interviews. And you were actually the last interview that I did that day, and in a lot of ways, the most meaningful. So,
thank you.
Absolutely, and talk to us about the main pointers for having a good interview, whether for an internship or a full-time.
Okay. So maybe it'd be helpful for your audience to let me give a tiny bit of background about myself as it relates to interviews. So I spent 25, 26, something like that years as an infrastructure manager. So I managed teams of people that did various infrastructure roles in IT operations. So guys that manage servers, storage, that kind of stuff. So as part of that job, I had to interview people quite often, and I found it so at the company I worked for, they didn't have a lot of strict you must interview this way or anything like so. So we were kind of free as managers to come up with our own interview styles and processes. And I will just head all this off with, there's a fantastic resource that I encourage all your listeners to go check out, where I learned a lot from around interviewing, be it whether you're being interviewed or you're the person interviewing. It's a podcast. It's free. It's been around for a very long time, called Manager Tools. And the name may be a little deceptive because it's really not just for managers, but it also has a sub podcast called Career Tools, and it's very, very practical advice. And I don't get paid by them. I have no association with them at all. I just learned a ton when I was a new manager, and even as a more experienced manager, of just like a lot of what you learn in college, like if you do like MBA programs. Is really great if you want to run a business, if you want to start your own business, or if you want to be a leader of a business. But one of the areas it doesn't really teach you is if you want to be a manager. And a lot of people get managers and leaders mixed up. They're related, but they're a little different. And a lot of the tactical day-to-day of managing is, managing your team day to day, and then also, of course, interviewing and hiring. And one of the most important things you do as a manager is ensure that good people come in and you keep out bad people, because any team you've ever worked on, whether it be in school or a job, if you have one bad person who really kind of disrupts the team dynamics, it's hugely detrimental. Not only does that person usually not perform very well, but they're kind of sucking the performance out of the other people in the team. And and then as a manager, you have to kind of deal with that. You have to either try to correct that behavior, or if it's just not correctable, you have to remove that individual. And then the payoff for that is now you got to start all over. Hiring process, right, which is hugely expensive, just from time and energy, all that, and money. So knowing how to interview well is very important. So I did a lot of study and trying to figure out, okay, how do you do this, right? It's not, there's definitely plenty of things written about how to do it. But I found manager tools to be a very practical, like, here's what you do. I think your original question was kind of, sorry, remind me your original question around interviewing. Like,
No, yeah.
Well, what was your original question around interviewing? I'm sorry.
Absolutely, yeah. No, so first of all, I think if it was a good idea to like give the students some background, and if you could just tell us more about what your current role entails and some of the work that you've been focusing on today, kind of is, for us to get like a better idea.
Sure. So today I'm not a manager. So today I'm not a people manager. I have manager in my title, but I'm not a people manager.
Right.
I just did that for many years. So today I manage people indirectly. I have to use there's two types of power. This is also manager tools information. Two types of power that we usually have. Right? We have role power, where the organization it bestows upon you. Okay, you're hierarchically in charge of certain people, right? You have the ability to discipline, hire, fire, promote, and reward. And then there's relationship power. So relationship power is just the relationship, the power that you have to pull me and ask me for a favor because we have a relationship, right?
Right.
And the difference between those two, one important difference is role power has finite limits, right? Like the organization only gives you so much, right? You've got whatever your span of control is, and that's it. Whereas relationship power is technically unbounded, right? I mean, I can go have as many relationships as I can possibly manage to do with as many people, and make those relationships as deep as I want to invest in, or that I'm able to do with those people. So in my current role, I don't have role power, but I have to leverage relationship power. So I have to maintain good relationships with my customer, my coworkers that I need to bring in to help deliver services and things like that. And certainly Microsoft, like most companies, they strategically put in place metrics and incentives to make sure roles work together, right? I mean, there's a lot of thought put into that, so that helps certainly too.
Right. Yeah.
So just back to interviewing a little bit. Thinking about when you interview, it's the whole thing is just an artificial reality, right? But the whole goal is, back to what I was saying around one of your most important jobs of a manager is to, make sure only good people come in and to keep bad people out. So, only the best candidates come through. So you think about that whole process of the resume, the interview, and the offer, right? Those are all just like screens, right? They're filters to keep, to weed stuff out, right? You make a job posting, you put some requirements in it, right? So hopefully that you're only getting candidates that meet those requirements, right? And you can have a process where you kind of, somebody filters that out, either a system or a person, whatever. Okay, cool. So now I'm only getting candidates that meet those requirements, right? And then you can require years of experience or, all kinds of things, right? You know what you see on a job posting. And then the next stage would be the interview, right? Which is the next kind of screen, right? So only the best resumes get through, right? Because I don't know the person at this point. Only resumes gets through. And then I've got some resumes that met all my criteria. and then those get reviewed and ranked, and then you're like, okay, well, I can't interview everybody, so I need to interview. I got to prioritize, and only interview the best of those. So now you're down to hopefully a lot less, right? So you had however many resumes come in, you filter those, and then okay, now I've got just the filtered ones. I'm going to just filter those again, and then just do the interview for those, right? So in each way, I'm hopefully filtering out less and less likely candidates, and hopefully getting the best candidates.
Right.
And then you have the interview. So then the interview is another way to filter people, right? And you can do that a jillion different ways. There's certainly more fair ways to do it than others. And at least in my experience, most companies kind of have, some of them have more structured interview processes, and some of them are just more freeform. It really kind of depends on the size and complexity of the company, and and how much effort they want to put into that.
Got it. Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. I feel like, for me at least, the interview is not only the most important, but also the best part of this job recruitment process. I feel like it's a very limited window of like an opportunity to really show what your values are, and some of the traits that would align you with the current role that you are applying for. And whenever we spoke and we were doing a mock interview, you gave me some really cool pointers, some really good advice that I hadn't thought about, which in reality it may seem so simple to say things in a certain way or to mention things that not a lot of people mention, but it doesn't really cross your mind until someone like yourself that has been experienced in this field tells you to do those stuff. And primarily two that have stood out for me is the elevator pitch. Everyone knows the elevator pitch, but sharing more about your background, like personal background during the elevator pitch, shows a little bit more comfort, and you'll get to open up more. And the second one is probably my favorite one, which I'm going to apply every interview from now on, is asking for the job at the end of the interview. Tell us more about those two, and some of the ways that maybe even your own advice has influenced you positively in your career.
Yeah, so those two things are very important, right? You said the elevator pitch. I'll rephrase it as also the tell me a little bit about yourself question, right? Because I do see that so often in interviews. Because that's a great, easy way to start, right? It's an easy way to start and ask the person, just tell me a little bit about yourself. The opportunity there is for you to control the narrative, all right, and to tell, like you just mentioned a minute ago, right? It's an opportunity for you to tell things to the interviewer that either they wouldn't normally ask because they don't think about it, or it might be against their internal policies, like HR policies, to ask that. Doesn't mean you can't tell them that, but it just means they can't ask that. It may be a protected class for discrimination or something like that. But you as a candidate are free to say whatever you want to say. They just can't ask. So it's a great way to share your family background, your pieces of your upbringing. I wouldn't necessarily do it in an elevator pitch necessarily, like in that actual like elevator scenario, just bumping into somebody. But when they ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself, it's a huge opening, and you should be prepared for it, because more often than not will come. It may not be those exact words, but it'll be something to that effect of some kind of open forum, usually at the beginning, to just give some kind of narrative about yourself. And so I think when you and I talked, we talked about the ability to kind of share some family values,
right?
Like what makes you, right? And where did you get those values? Your family, your background, maybe brothers and sisters, things like that. Because ultimately, what's an advantage to you is if you can find some way to connect with your interviewer, right? And you may have multiple interviewers, connect with them on some kind of similarity. And so whether it's, hey, we have like you mentioned, before we got started, I have a guitar in my room, right? Well, maybe we both play guitar, right? So boom, we immediately have something in common that we can talk about, right? And if I've got a slate of candidates that I've got one guy who I've got like 5 things in common with, and the rest I don't, right? And depending, right? If it's a very structured interview process that is very, it has like a grading system and everything like that. And it may not work for you, but not every company has that. So
Right.
you're looking for any advantage you can to connect with that person, because in reality, people generally hire people that are like them in some way. It's not fair, but it is what it is. Humans. So use that to your advantage. You probably have something in common with that person at some level, right?
Right.
And that's why I think one of the other things I mentioned to you, like just on a resume, if you work into the conversation, even better. But mention your hobbies or affiliations, or if you volunteer and with other organizations, things that they might not volunteer with, right? So
Right.
we're here in Houston, right? So if you're part of the rodeo, or you're part of, if you're part of junior league or some other thing that has participants from a wide variety of folks, there's a decent chance that they might be part of that, right? Or their spouse is part of that, or somebody they know, their brother, sister, whatever. It's any kind of connection is better than none.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's, I guess, like my corollary to that is when, like for example, like if you meet somebody who's whatever, a plumber, right? And you meet John, and he's a plumber, and hey John, we're talking at the our kids' basketball game or whatever, and then 2 weeks later I need a plumber. I am far more likely to call John because I've met him than I am to say, well, let me go dig through Yelp or any other source
Right.
and try to find, and because this is just human nature. So the other piece of advice I'd give is, so we talked about the job posting, the resume, the interview, and then really what comes after the interview is the offer, right? So if you've got the interview, then you're past most of the hurdles. Your goal now is just to get an offer, right? So getting to the person that can make you an offer is the most important thing you can do. So if you can get access to the hiring manager, which in most companies is the person, there's like a person that's making that hire fire decision for the opening on their team. That's the best thing in the world you can do, right? And I'm sure you've had other people tell you, networking is super important, right? As you know. So trying to figure out who the hiring manager is for a position. And that's finding somebody at that company that or could be introduced to, or know somebody who knows them, and I know about LinkedIn and all that other good stuff, but don't limit yourself to that, right? Facebook, family, friends, whatever, right? Anything you can do to get access to the hiring manager, whether it's, hey, can I take you out to lunch? Can I take you to coffee? Could I get 5 minutes of your time on the phone? Because this happened to me plenty of times as a manager, right? I have people that just want to have a conversation with me, even if I didn't have an opening at the time, right? But like I've literally hired somebody who just was persistent over the course of maybe a year and a half of just, hey, just checking in with you. Do you have any openings? And then eventually, yeah, I did have an opening. And like, hey, well, this person's really been, they've been after me and at least want the job because they follow up and nobody else does. So sure, I'll give you an interview. Why not? Right? So that's your goal, right? Just to get access to the hiring manager, because ultimately that's usually the person that can get you an offer. And that's
Absolutely.
that's your ultimate objective.
100%. 100%. I feel like that's great advice, and I think that it always comes down to stepping out of your comfort zone. Like it's always worth it to step out of your comfort zone. Whenever, especially like in this conversation, we're talking networking. Searching for, especially attending these like networking events where you don't know anyone and you're forced to sell yourself and establish connections genuinely, is something that I've always been an advocate for, and what I'm trying to like sell in this podcast as well, for students to do that so they can have better chances in landing their dream role. But in your experience, Stuart, how much of your success do you attribute to being a good communicating with people and being good at selling yourself in these types of scenarios?
I mean, that's certainly important, right? You have to be able to quickly and powerfully sell yourself to that person. But even more important, I mean, it really goes back to networking. Like the most, I mean, other than my very first job, every job I've had since then has just been through people that I knew at the previous job who had maybe moved on, and said, "Hey, Stuart, we have this opening. Would you be interested?" And sure, okay, let me hear about it. Now I'll come talk to you, right? And if it's good, great, and we move on. And even at times where, like, I've been laid off before, right? It happens all the time in tech. And you go through the drudgery of applying for all this stuff, but ultimately the next job I got was because somebody I knew said, "Hey, I heard you were looking for a job. I didn't realize you didn't. Mistake number one, don't. You should tell everybody that you're looking for a job and what you're looking for. Had I done that sooner, I would have got a job a lot sooner. But ultimately, it was just him saying, "Hey, you know what? My buddy's the CIO. Would you be interested in talking to him? We need somebody." Turns out, like, great, cool, and we got a job. No problem at all. Because if you come in as a referral, your odds are so much better, especially in a smaller organization. I'm saying, 10,000 people or less or something. Like usually the individual departments are a lot smaller, so therefore it's just fewer people. So it's usually less formal. Right. But, and they can just move a little faster. But yeah, I mean, it's really about networking. That's the easiest way to do it.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. And, it always seems so attractive in career-wise, like getting to that point of, hey, the only way that I'm getting a job or the only way that I'm landing these cool roles is through referrals. You get to skip that whole recruiting season, and because it can be kind of like dreading at points. And I actually met someone today that I'm going to be interviewing very soon, and he got all these jobs because they were looking for him. He never applied to them, and I feel like that's got to be the result of years and years of good networking habits, and that people don't really talk about that much. Well, it takes work to continue to nurture those relationships that you establish at this event or everything, and talking to recruiters. And what do you think about that?
It does. And, I spoke a couple years ago to the kids at my youngest son's high school. Like I think they had a career day thing. And when I came in and talked to them, I kind of I didn't tell them too much about what I did. I figured that's kind of boring. But I said, what I told them was like, let's talk about how to get a job, guys. And the number one thing I told them is, like, you should network. And what does that mean, right? Because these are high school kids who are like, man. And I remember when I was young, I thought, like, okay, I have to go to some kind of mixer and walk around and exchange notes, like speed dating. I was like, no, but that's what I thought. I didn't know any better. I was young, and I was like, no, it's really not. And I asked the crowd of kids that were there. I was like, how many of you guys, play a sport outside of school, right? And they were, raise their hand. Or I said, maybe you go to a church. You go to church. Okay, yeah. Some kids raise their hand, right? Or you do some other activity, some other after school activity. I was like, okay. So whatever other group of people that you're around outside of school, all those kids, these are kids, right? So all these kids, they have parents, right? So, and their parents do stuff, right? And if and if your parents go there too, then then they talk to those parents, right? And they kind of figure out what those parents do, right? And do your parents have friends? Hopefully they have some friends, right? They have parents' friends or coworkers, people they know. I was like, so that's your extended network. And if you're at an age where you're looking for a job, and as long as you tell people, and I told them, you got to tell everybody what you want to do, right? You have to just put a big sign on your chest, say, I'm looking for this job, right? I said, but you have to tell them, because most people, especially older adults, most people in general, if you tell me, say, hey, Juan Pablo tells me, hey, I'm looking for a job in supply chain management. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm not supply chain management, but that's great, yeah. And then tomorrow, I'm somewhere, and some guy says, yeah, man, we just really trying to find a supply chain intern. We can't find anybody. I'm like, wait a minute. I know, because you told me yesterday. I said, but if you didn't tell me, that that guy would tell me he's looking for an intern. I'm going to go, well, that's nice. Sure, I'll keep my eyes open, right? Yeah. So you have to tell people what you're after. Work it into the conversation. And then most people are more than happy to connect to people. Mm-hmm. That, connect an opportunity with a solution, right? Because ultimately that makes them look good, because they're helping somebody with a problem they have, right? They're trying to find somebody, right? And then you're helping the other person because they're trying to find the position, right? You're just linking two people to, an opportunity with a solution together. and it makes you look good. It makes them happy. It's win-win-win.
Yeah.
But you have to communicate, right? And you have to realize your network is way bigger than you think it is, if you choose to leverage it, right? If you choose to be aware of it, even.
I totally agree, Stuart. I want to mention that something that stood out to me when preparing for this interview is that you spent 23 years working at DXP Enterprises. What
I
did you
didn't actually.
learn? You didn't?
I spent 23 years at Stuart Title.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what did you learn from, being in a position like that for that long, and also some of the lessons that you gained from jumping again into the job market after all of those years?
Sure. No, that's a great question. So I would say one of the things, there's lots of stuff. I was 23 years, man. One of the hardest lessons, but most valuable, was I had a director who was he'd come in, and he was my, well, I guess he was my direct manager for a while. Then he was my kind of skip level manager. And I had gone from being an engineer over, I did databases, to being the manager over that team. So I was kind of managing something I knew very well, right? I went from being an individual contributor in that area to a manager over that area. I had to learn management, which is, as I quickly learned, not necessarily a better job, just a different job. So learn how to do that. So I got really comfortable with that. And then he pushed me to manage a totally different team. That I kind of knew that technology a little bit, but I wasn't nearly as much of an expert in that area. And I was very concerned with it, right? And it was pretty much of, hey, we have this opportunity for you, or if you don't like that, the door's right over there. So I was like, well, I guess I'm taking it. And it was scary, but it taught me a couple things. It certainly, as a manager, it taught me, okay, I have to just trust the people that are there, right? I mean, I have to evaluate them and make sure that they're doing okay, but I can't be the expert. Like, they have to be the expert, because I don't know that area very well.
Right.
I mean, I know it enough that they really can't, pull the wool over my eyes too much, but I'm not deep in it, right? It's evolved since I had ever messed with it. So it taught me to be a little less hands-on, right? I just had to trust my people and just be the manager. And it also taught me that I really liked variety. Like, having to do something different was first scary, but then I kind of liked it. And then after about 2 or 3 years, it was like, okay, now I kind of want to do something different. So him pushing me out of my comfort zone was one of the best things that happened to me. And the other thing about being somewhere for a long time is you see the ideas come back around, right? So maybe we tried to do whatever kind of initiative, and it sort of worked, or maybe kind of fell flat, and then maybe 5 years later, 6 years later, 7 years later, that idea comes back around, and you're kind of like, well, okay, we tried this, didn't work, but learning to be open to it, open to doing it again, because maybe the timing's different, right? Because maybe it was a time, it was the wrong time, the situation was, the environment just was whatever it was back then, and it didn't work, but it could work again, because maybe there's different people in play. It's a different time, in our case, technology's changed. It might be more successful, and just to kind of go with it, right? And not be, definitely don't want to be the person who's like, well, this is never going to work. And, you don't want to be that guy, because that guy gets sidelines real fast. So you just got to be kind of game for it, right? Game to try. And, authentically try. Not to, not just kind of like, well, I'll just kind of go along and wait for this thing to fail. No, you have to really kind of lean into it and show that you're willing to give it a try. Because whoever is in charge, whose idea it is definitely on the lookout for, like, okay, who's on board and who's not on board. And the people who aren't on board, we'll sideline them, and and that'll probably impact them down the road.
Yeah.
So you just want to be, you can put all your logical objections up front before the commitment is made. But once that commitment is made, like, hey, we're going to do this, you've got to just go with it.
I agree. I think I've had a couple situations like that where it's very unique, when you don't really align with what maybe your superior wants to do, but you got to do it anyway because it's your boss, and
Yeah, I
and
mean, pretty
if he
much.
wants it
Right?
done a certain way, like you're gonna make it. So
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the early lessons I got, because I got into IT very young, and it was my first job. I mean, pretty much my first job was in IT at 18, and then I've been in IT ever since. So, I mean, that's been my life. And I started out doing that when I was a kid, before work, just because I enjoyed, playing on computers, playing games, that kind of stuff, right? It's fun. So then I made it a career, and you do have to be careful with that, with that model, because you can really just drain all the fun out of something when you have to do it the way somebody else wants you to do it. And then of course when you do it for decades on end, you're no longer looking excited to come do computer stuff on your own anymore, because it is it's like, that's why I do non-computer things for fun.
yeah, absolutely.
So that's a lesson learned on that. Just be careful. People say, "Oh, well, just I'll turn my hobby into a job." It's like, well, yeah, there are risks with that.
Absolutely. No, yeah. I feel like what you mentioned is always a common denominator of stepping out of your comfort zone. That's something that it's always advocated for here at the Reach Out podcast. And Stuart, coming towards the end of our interview,
Yes.
I'm going to ask you my favorite question to ask people,
Okay.
which is, Stuart, what makes you happy?
Oh man, probably the thing that makes me the most happy is growing. And we like I said, what we talked right before, the thing is, working on guitar. And then my other big hobby, I used to have a lot of hobbies, and I had to kind of really whittle them down because I just kind of was horrible at all of them. Because I just didn't have enough time to I have so many interests, and that's a downside too. But so the other one is I do is golf, because I'm horrible at both of them, but I'm getting slowly better. And the joy with that is incremental improvements. And if you guys have ever read Atomic Habits, kind of the main takeaway from that book is if you just got to get 1% better at something, and then you keep working on it, and you get 1% better, and over time you'll get better. Right? Nobody gets like 100% better at anything in a short amount of time, and both of those pursuits are very slow, at least for me, because I'm not at all athletically inclined and apparently not very musically inclined. But I've learned that if I keep at it, I will improve, and there's a lot of joy in that. And I think because those have such a long, there's so much to learn for each of those things that I can enjoy them for a very long time. And there's a lot of satisfaction for me personally of being able to keep working at something and continually see my improvement. Either I can hit the ball better, or I can play a chord better, or whatever it is. That's what makes me the most happy, and of course my family.
Well, Stuart, I respect you a lot for that. It's very common to see people already in the workforce that just forget about personal development and forget about the importance of having hobbies and just trying to get better at this stuff, even when you're not the best at the beginning. So that's something definitely that I look up to you for, and something that I'm really excited to employ whenever I'm graduated. And again, keeping on doing the guitar. I'm starting to learn how to play the piano properly. This podcast, and just coloring. Drawing and coloring is something that's
awesome.
kind of on my mind
that too. It's a hobby I had to sacrifice to get, but I totally love that as well. Art, yes.
Yeah, Stuart. Any last pointers? Any last thoughts and messages to our audience?
Keep growing. Don't give up, and don't worry if you don't know what the heck you're doing, because most of us don't know what the heck we're doing. But if you just keep moving forward, you'll figure it out, and you'll enjoy the process. Just enjoy the process. Life's awesome.
Very well said. For everyone out there, again, it's not about what you can take from people or where you can gain from people, but it's about building genuine relationships and connections. Never forget to reach out. And see you guys in the next one.
All right. Thank you, Juan Pablo. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Stuart. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Sweet, I'm so tired of you